All right, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're at in the world. First of all, thank you for joining this educational webinar on the two types of thermal cameras for the fire service, situational awareness and decision-making cameras. We're very pleased to introduce one of the leading experts in thermal imaging training, Andy Starnes of Insight Training. Andy's been a career firefighter for over 30 years and really dedicated himself and his work to being a lifelong student of the fire service, with a significant emphasis on thermal imaging training, the proper use of thermal imaging cameras for the fire service. So this is certainly his passion, and he is very good at what he does because of that. So let's get started. Andy, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, quick sound check. Do you hear me okay, Brent?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you all for joining us. We are going to cover a lot of material, so it'll be rather intense, but I hope you can hang on with me and enjoy the ride. So we're going to talk about the two main types of fire service TICs and how that applies specifically to firefighters. Brent gave you an overview about myself, but that's my world there. I currently serve as a battalion chief here in North Carolina, and my 13-year-old daughter is visiting me at work there. And my world is pretty simple. It's my faith, my family, and friends in fire service. I don't play sports. I don't do anything extracurricular other than work out and focus on them. So if you have any firefighters who are interested in behavioral health stuff, you can reach out to me, because that's pretty much my only other passion. But I always share that at every presentation, because I think it's important for firefighters to remember, you serve the world, don't forget to serve your family. So what we're here today to learn, the objectives of this course is to explain a lot of things to you, but we're going to make it experientially relevant. We're going to bring you right down to where firefighters work. So before you can talk about the two main types of TICs, we're going to take care of some issues. And believe it or not, fire service TICs, a lot of the things you hear firefighters complain about actually are end user behavior calls. So we're going to talk briefly about TIC failure. We're going to talk about the two main types of fire service TICs. We're going to break down the differences of each type, and thanks to Seek Thermal for sponsoring this, we're going to share with them a lot about the Fire Pro X and the Attack Pro. There'll be some brief examples of other cameras in here, because I'm camera agnostic, but we want to make sure that you see the specific examples of their cameras. So let's talk about how we fail as a firefighter with or without a TIC. First of all, we have to carry the device. Believe it or not, per a survey we did with Firehouse Magazine back in 2020, 50% of the time the device is left on the charger of the truck. Firefighters are still using it only for search and overhaul, which is greatly detrimental to the service of the citizen. We fail by training incorrectly, using artificial or fake smoke with heated sources such as heated mannequins or live victims, and firefighters become conditioned to have a false, basically, image of what the victim's going to look like in that environment. The other issue is, which we'll talk in length about, is firefighters read the spot temperature, that small little number in the bottom right-hand corner, instead of the overall environment. This has become such a problem that NFPA removed that number. The other thing is, it's a tactical device used for decision making. So firefighters fail to use it in the decision-making process, such as size up, fire attack, ventilation, enhancing their search, RIT, all of those things it could help with. And believe it or not, this sounds very basic, but I hear it all the time. Firefighters say, I went in, I could see, and then 6 to 8 feet or 2 to 3 meters in from my friends overseas, the TIC was useless, it whited out. New thermal imaging cameras don't white out due to heat. They white out due to other issues such as moisture and particulate building up on the lens, and firefighters don't know to wipe the front of the device where the germanium lens is. Every time they wipe their face piece, they need to wipe their lens. And that usually occurs because we are standing up. And this was taught to me by my friends overseas. He said, you Americans have really good turnout gear, but you only have 6 layers of protection around your waist, 3 in your coat, 3 in your pants, but you only have 1 layer around your brain and your hood and your face piece. And then you stand up and you expect things to work in that environment. It's not going to work well when you stand up in a convection current or exhaust. And the biggest issues are the bottom two, which is we fail by not being educated and trained properly on the implementation of it and understanding that device. And we stop using it because of our past failures. The battery died out on me, it whited out, I'm never going to use it again. And I quote one of my instructors, Thomas Anderson. He says, how many of you had your car break down? Everybody raises their hand. He said, how'd you get here? Did you walk? Well, your car failed you. You're still going to use your car, right? I know most of you would turn around and go back and get your cell phone if you forgot it at home, and I'll bet you your cell phone's failed you before. Technology is technology. It's all going to have issues, and a lot of times it's due to us not taking care of it and understanding it, such as here. I'm going to show you when we were in Loudoun County, Virginia, doing our training, that you will look through the Seek Attack Pro, the decision-making camera, at an environment, and you'll just see a gray-white screen. But then you'll briefly see the camera drop. You'll hear this noise where I'm wiping the lens. Watch what happens right after I wipe the lens to the image and what you see afterwards. You look really closely, you can see something moving across the ceiling. Watch. That's convection currents coming from the far right, telling you where the fire room was. And that was due to wiping the lens so we could see better. Moisture had built up on the germanium window at the front of it, and we missed that because we were in a hurry, standing up and not wiping the lens. So that's an end user behavior. So now we've addressed some common issues, or what I call the reasons for TIC failure. You need to know why we're here to help you with this. I need you to understand that firefighters have been incorrectly taught to measure heat. And there's been anecdotal information that's been passed on from previous generations. But the problem with the way we were taught to measure heat in the 50s and 60s, when we had turnout gear that was basically cotton jackets and hip boots and no hoods, and now in the environment you work in, if you wait till you feel pain in the gear you wear now, it's too late. Whether you're using the European standard or the American standard, they both base their standards on when a firefighter receives a second-degree burn. So why is understanding heat transfer, and energy important? Because when you're hurting in your protective ensemble or your PPE, your turnout gear, the victim is screaming and dying in their polyester pajamas. And the only device that can actually see heat is left on the charger of the truck. So if we fail to recognize those actual conditions, we're actually negligent in our service and our delivery of it. So if we're going to enhance and work smarter and find the victim faster and put the fire out faster, we need a device to simply identify the problem. We're not going to over rely on it, but we want to be able to see the threat and mitigate the threat and know that your skin isn't a reliable thermometer. Because this was proven in 1967 by Alice Stoll, which is where the data comes from, where your turnout gear is developed from something called thermal protective performance per NFPA. And what she discovered when she burned 269 victims on their arm, US naval sailors, for this study, that at 131 degrees Fahrenheit, forgive me for my friends overseas, I'm not going to do Celsius, you produce a second-degree burn when you have direct contact. Second-degree burn or blister comes from her work, Alice Stoll. If she held that heat source to you and your skin temperature increased, you're now at 140 degrees and your pain receptors are turned off. Think about that. If you're going to use your ears, your hand, or your body as a thermometer, once your temperature or your skin reaches that temperature, fight or flight engage, endorphins kick in so you can get away from the threat. And now you cannot measure heat because you are trying to get away from it because you're numb. But if I stay in that environment and continue to stay there as my skin temperature increases to 162 degrees Fahrenheit, human skin is destroyed. And the most convicting part of this is if I allow that heat to stay there for 30 seconds or more, after the heat source is removed, 35% of the burn damage occurs. So 1/3 of the damage, greater than 1/3 of the damage occurs after the heat is removed. So we need to focus on making it tenable and get rid of the heat. And the device that allows us to do that is a thermal imaging camera. It's not a thermometer, but it allows us to see heat as we see the effects of heat on this firefighter walking around through the attack pro as he was loading the flashover container. I want you to look at how much heat was in that simple little environment where we loaded OSB pallets and straw. You're looking at red is around 1,000 degrees apparent temperatures, which we'll discuss what that means. That's a massive amount of heat, and they're not even feeling it. So don't judge heat based on what you feel, because the victim would beg to differ with you about your definition of heat and theirs. So what does your TIC see? Whether it's a situational awareness TIC or a decision-making camera, it sees long-wave infrared radiation off of surfaces. 2/3 of the energy of a fire is transmitted in the infrared spectrum, which is 7 to 14 microns. Micron is a millionth of a meter, and that's where the heat's transferred or transmitted. We can't see that. We can feel it at some point, but we can also use the camera to do things like diagnostics. Where might the victim be, their locations, where's the fire, what's the severity of the fire, what's the layout of the room or the building, and we can see for additional potential hazards. Are there holes in floors? Is there a staircase I missed? All of those things we want to look for and more, we can see if we use this device to simply get a layout, no different than having a map before you go on a trip and looking for your route. And that's why we simply advise to look both ways before you cross the street, because you don't want to get hit by a car. Well, when you make entry to a burning building, we recommend that crew leaders have a decision-making camera to get that information, communicate it to their crews, and then put the camera down. Don't have it glued to your face. So that being said, I want you to understand what your camera doesn't do. Your camera does not see gas temperatures, smoke temperatures accurately, or read shiny surfaces well. It is not a thermometer. It provides apparent temperatures, which is uncompensated temperature measurements based on a preset emissivity. So you shouldn't be using this to read the exact measurements. You shouldn't be pointing this at people's foreheads to try to see if they have COVID or a fever. And you need to know that if you see moving gray-white convection currents like you see coming up the stairs to the Attack Pro here, that's hot. Matter of fact, one of the ways they test your gear is in a convection oven, basically, a forced air oven test where superheated air travels over your devices until they fail. That fast-moving gray-white stuff is hot. So the absence of color isn't the absence of heat, no matter what device you use. Keep that in mind when you're using any thermal imaging device, and don't be like my friends here and stand up, and as you can see the amount of heat they're taking to their shoulders and their face piece. And every firefighter should know, whether you're in Europe or overseas or here in America, the weakest link we wear is that small, thin piece of plastic known as a face piece, 2 to 3 millimeters thick in the United States, and it's thinner overseas. Now, we've covered the failure aspect of how we fail with the device. We've covered what it will see, but I need to understand, what are those two main types? That's what you're here to learn about. Well, let's give you a simple analogy. A lot of firefighters, whether you're in Europe or you're here, like the Halligan tool. As a matter of fact, my friends over at IFRT teach a great forcible entry class. But there are 3 different types of forcible entry tools right here in front of you, even though they're all supposedly Halligans. Well, if you talk to anybody who's worth their salt who loves forcible entry, they'll tell you that 2 of these devices are not really Halligans. Well, technically they are. If I go on the internet, it says they are. But performance of each one varies depending on whose hands it's in and how well it's designed, and the price tag. So not every tool performs as advertised. Why do I tell you that? Because not all TICs are created equal. Here are 3 high resolution cameras from different manufacturers, different ages, pointed at the same heat source, the Max Firebox, which we use to train firefighters when we don't have a live fire environment. And they're producing 3 different temperature color correlations, 3 different versions of the fire based on the manufacturer's specifications and programming. These are decision-making cameras. Then there's situational awareness TICs like the Fire Pro X. You have industrial TICs, which somehow end up in fire stations occasionally, which should not be there. You've got drone or UAS platforms. You've got friends who work in the gas industry like BP, Shell, and all of those big companies. They use optical gas imaging. That's a separate type of cameras. Then you got search and rescue, like all of our friends that are searching for victims right now in Turkey and Syria, God bless them. They're using different types of thermal imaging cameras with scopes on them and all kind of things to look for victims. They're programmed differently, they're set differently. Bottom line, a TIC is not a TIC. There's thousands of different models out there in the industry, and we need to understand the 2 main types that we have and how those are broken down. But I'm going to show you 3 high resolution cameras pointing at the exact same heat source. These are all decision-making cameras, and they show the fire differently. So it's important that you know your TIC, when it shows color, when it doesn't, when it switches between high and low sensitivity, what the icons mean, what convection currents mean, how slow or fast your camera is. Does it have specific application modes that are beneficial to you? Do you know how to use them before you go into a fire? Can you program it to make it easier on you and your firefighters? All of that needs to be worked out in training and implementation and policy long before you ever go into fire. I hear it all the time. Yeah, I got some good experience on that last fire with it. I'm like, no, that's not the time I want you to get experience with a TIC. I want you to be so well trained and competent on it that when you go to a fire, you can maximize your effectiveness with it. Don't wait till you're in a fire and realize, wow, I wish I would have known this camera has XYZ feature. So let's talk about the issue that's going on just across the globe. Is I see a lot of fire departments, well-funded trucks, stations, furniture, giant TVs, custom recliners, and they're using 15 to 20-year-old thermal imaging cameras on their frontline apparatus, like this camera here. Great camera in 1999, but now it looks like two dots when I look at a person. According to U.S. Fire Administration, 70% of fire departments in 2015 in the U.S. only had one thermal imaging camera on the actual fire scene. Didn't say what kind, didn't say how old. Think about that. Are you good with your fire department in your hometown coming to look for your family with this device? Okay, that's a problem, because that's basically like saying, you know, I'm going to use this phone here and get the same results as my iPhone 14 or Samsung Galaxy or whatever is out there now. We encourage you, go get your old phone out of the junk drawer, like Chief John Lightly, one of my instructors, says. We ask you to look up Facebook on it. We ask you to Google this webinar, see what you get. Try texting on it. Does that sound absurd? Well, so is expecting your 1990s or 2000 model thermal imaging camera, which was great back then, to perform like a 2023 model, because technology is leaps and bounds of where it has been or was. You need to understand that the fire departments have to budget to upgrade their technology every 3 to 5 years, or they're behind. I mean, we are constantly adding technology to our world, but yet we're not training and understanding it. And the reason I'm telling you that is because of this issue right here. Before I got trained by thermographers, I was trained by firefighters. And when I got hurt and went to school, because I realized I don't know what I don't know, and I'm still working on that, when I went to thermography classes and certifications, I learned there's two different worlds. There's quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative is industrial, medical, exact measurements. We're looking for almost dialed into the 10th of a degree of a thermal imaging or temperature measurement they're looking for. We don't use those types of devices. They're expensive, they require training, just like all of my instructors have to be level 1 thermography certified to understand how to use a basic industrial camera, whereas a fire service camera sees qualitative measurements. We're looking for heat loss, diagnostics, live fire and layout like you're taught in recruit school or your basic firefighter training. We're looking for what's wrong, anomalies, and that helps us diagnose things and find the fire. Whereas industrial cameras are specific, and they're specific to their context. So don't get these mixed up, and don't try to measure temperature with a fire service TIC. And here's where the issue even further compounds. I think thermal imaging was on its way and doing well until we suddenly released situational awareness cameras without education. The situational awareness cameras, all these cameras on the left, are great if they're used in their context. The problem was they were released, pushed out, and firefighters were not educated. And you find fire departments who bought the K1, the K2, the Fire Pro X, the MSA iTic, the Scott Sight, now the MSA Lunar that's out there. They bought them thinking those devices would replace the devices on the right. They're higher resolution, faster processor speed, better insulated decision-making cameras. Now, if you ever bought something cheap for the house, when you should have bought the expensive thing, you learned your lesson pretty quickly, especially in marriage. So let's look at two types of cameras and realize what their specific uses and context is for. A situational awareness camera, like the ones on the left here, are designed to prevent firefighter disorientation, to keep you oriented and regain orientation. That was their original sole intent. And they've been misused, mismarketed, and pushed out into different ways. Yes, you can use them for different ways than that, but you need to realize that they're very limited because of the things that they don't have. They don't have the insulation. They don't typically have the higher resolution. They are smaller and harder to see, and some of them are quite slow. And I don't know about you, but I've never met a patient firefighter in a fire. So if you're using a 9 hertz camera and expecting it to perform like a 25 to 60 hertz camera, you're going to be disappointed, injured, or worse. Whereas your decision-making camera should be a minimum of 320 by 240, 76,800 pixels. That's per NFPA. And it should have at least 25 to 30 hertz refresh rate. We prefer as fast as you can get, depending on the programming and how the manufacturer does it. And those are used to guide, lead, and enhance strategic decision-making. That's their purpose. They're better insulated. They have wider screens, brighter screens, bigger field of view. They are designed to help the crew leader, the boss, or like, as I like to say, the designated adult. So you need to know the difference. Here's 4 different decision-making cameras. Firefighters having fun at our Wilson Fire Rescue class in North Carolina with the Max Firebox. They're seeing the difference in those cameras side by side, and we put situational awareness cameras up there, and they see that a higher resolution camera with faster refresh rate does look and work differently than a situational awareness camera. They also see the difference between a narrow field of view and a wide field of view. We also show them examples of how the camera's thermal sensitivity, its ability to detect temperatures of similar temperatures of objects side by side, as that number goes up, the camera's ability and performance goes down. So it's an inverse relationship. So if you look at thermal sensitivity ratings, you don't want a camera above 80 millikelvin, because the lower that number is, the better your chances of being able to pick out a victim versus a pile of clothes, and see lots of other things that affect your decision making. Here's your current situational awareness TICs that are on the market. Can't predict what's next, but I would challenge you to look at this, and throughout this presentation, there are QR codes for a reason. There's QR codes here to a specific situational awareness thermal imaging survey from Firehouse Magazine. I encourage you to read. This was my main purpose of this webinar. 40% of American fire service do not know the difference between situational awareness TICs and decision-making TICs. And I see that everywhere I travel, because they say, oh, we have the I-TIC or we have the K2. And I said, well, what are you doing with it? Oh, you know, the battalion chief has it, or we're doing size up with it. I'm like, no, absolutely not. You're in trouble. You're expecting something with 19,200 pixels to perform like a 80,000 pixel camera. You're in trouble. So check out this QR code, scan it, go there and read that survey, and realize we are not as well educated in this area as we should be. Here's the two types that Seek Thermal currently makes. On the left, you have the Fire Pro X, which is a situational awareness TIC, and on the right, you have the Attack Pro. They are specific uses in their context. One is to prevent firefighter disorientation and aid in, getting some other information close by, where the Attack Pro is a decision-making camera. That firefighter who's using that, whether they're the company officer, the battalion chief, or the crew leader, can do a lot of things. Like my friends in Germany here, this is actually taken at IFRT, or doing an enhanced search, and we're able to watch them through the eyes of the Attack Pro in pretty amazing clarity. So, but when we talk about these two, I want you to don't get lost in the whole situational awareness TICs are just small areas and they're not as useful as you think they are, because I think firefighters really miss the boat when we realize, oh, we look at line of duty deaths, that's terrible, and we're averaging 40 to 80 deaths a year, and that's terrible, but that's not that high compared to the rest of the industry. All right, I need you to look up line of duty injuries and realize that 40 to 50,000 injuries occur every year on the fire ground, and 18% of them occur due to firefighters being trapped, caught, or lost. Look at that. 18% of all those thousands of injuries, which can result in time off from work. It's important for firefighters to regain orientation and understand why these devices can help them regain it. It's not their primary means of orientation, but it's a secondary. So make sure that you have this as a backup plan. This picture of the Fire Pro X, where the firefighter regains his orientation by grabbing the hose line. Notice the hose line is dark. Why? Because the hose line has cold water flowing through it, and it allows them to find it. And if you read the Mayday Project by Don Abbott, you'll realize that 48% of lost firefighters were operating without the protection of a hose line, whether it was the truck company or whoever it was searching ahead of it, and they got knocked off the line, they got disoriented, whatever it may be. Well, what's my plan B? We're taught to stay on a hose line, stay on a wall, stay on a search rope. Every one of these reports I read where someone's disoriented, they're not on any of those. So I got my phone as a backup. I got a card box on the fire truck that has directions. I got a map book. I got an iPad. I got all these different ways in the fire truck to regain my orientation if I lose directions on the way to a call. But when I'm in a zero visibility environment, you're telling me I have to completely rely on my senses? Good luck. We need more than that. You're basically sensory deprived when you look at the gear and the environment you work in. The Fire Pro X is a great situational awareness TIC because it actually has the highest resolution out of all the ones that are out there. It reads up to 1,022 degrees apparent temperature. It's very narrow in its field of view. I need you to know that. It's designed for you to work up close. I wouldn't want to use this for size up and looking at buildings far away, because this camera, I can look within 7 to 10 feet of me pretty close. I can look at a firefighter who's down. I can take a quick look behind me, see where my crew is. I can do a lot of things with it if I'm a lone firefighter on a nozzle. And why do you say lone firefighter? Because 68% of America is protected by the volunteer fire service, which means they are showing up with less than 10 people, not all at once, on the fire ground. My friend and fellow instructor Joey Bax's department responds with 3 people, first due. That's an engineer, a captain, and a firefighter. They need something to help be a force multiplier for them. This camera has 3 different color application palettes. It is not intrinsically safe. So those of you who are looking at NFPA or ATEX standards overseas, understand it is IP67 rated ingress protection for dust and water intrusion, but it is not intrinsically safe. So your NFPA 1801 certifications or ATEX certifications are the ones you look for in those particular models. These are your 3 examples of the color palettes of this device. I would caution you when you start playing with color palettes, if you don't do training on these devices, you're going to be in trouble, because a pretty picture is far more than just a pretty picture. The picture on the left is fire mode, the picture in the middle is rainbow or color mode, and the picture on the far right is survey mode. Fire, you should leave that setting for that device anytime you're functioning in a fire, unless you're lost or disoriented in low heat. And then when you use the survey mode, which is low heat situations, you can find problems, smells and bells, things of that issue, false alarms. It's great for that. Think about how many false alarms and odors, electrical or odors or something burning you run as a fire service each year. Wouldn't it be nice to have a device to help me find that problem really quickly that doesn't cost my fire department a whole lot of money and I can have them on every firefighter? You can do that. We create these cheat sheets for every camera we make. We actually have a laminated TIC guide that we sell, but we look at this and say, this is something to help firefighters understand when they see color or the absence of color, these are the approximate or parent temperatures for that. This is your Fire Pro X color chart. 0 to 301 is all in grayscale. And I got news for you. The movie's lied to you. There's more than 50 shades of gray. The average thermal imaging camera uses around 255 contrasting shades of gray, and the average female can see 30 shades of gray, and the average male can see 10. So when you're under stress working in a fire, you can only see 4. So colorization of thermal threat is important, because we don't have time to analyze these images and sit there and stare at them on a screen. We're looking quickly and moving quickly. You see color shows up early at 302 degrees Fahrenheit. With yellow, it goes to 600 at orange and 800 at red, leading to purple. That's the unique feature of this device, because not any other device shows purple. This is why you don't use rainbow and fire attack. This is looking into a fire room. Around the door casing itself, you see green and blue, where flames are coming out. Would any of you associate green and blue with hot? No. Rainbow is a very interesting color palette if you study it, but I don't recommend firefighters using it. And if you look in the instructions in this device, it says recommended for demonstrations only. So let's stay in our lane when it comes to that. Whereas survey mode, the color palette on this device is extremely beneficial. I love Michael Whitty's research paper, Maximizing Thermal Imaging Use in Emergency Services. He says in his paper that fire service TICs should have 2 modes, fire and investigative. This is an investigative mode, and it can be used for a lot of things. And I understand a lot of departments don't have decision-making cameras, and they probably are using these out of context. You need to understand it doesn't have the same resolution quality as the Attack Pro, but it highlights color at 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Think about that for a second. You're farther away from a target, 150 degrees Fahrenheit, it's going to show color earlier, which gives you a possibility of knowing where the fire is or where the problem is, or an overheated electrical outlet or issue. It's a very valuable feature for firefighters to learn how to use and practice with. And this particular feature is demonstrated in Kingman, Arizona. Here we were doing some training. They're fighting fire above me. I walk below them to demonstrate getting my layout of the floor below them like I'm going in a high-rise building. And this is metal decking, metal I-beams, and I look up and look what I see. If you look right there through the device, you can see colorization of the metal decking, where it's heating up that concrete even and transferring that metal or that heat through that metal, called thermal bridging, a fancy word for conduction. And I'm able to see that, hey, my problem is directly above me. It's a simple, easy to use identification method. This device can be very beneficial for overhaul. I think it's probably the most misused way fire service TICs are used, because firefighters go in and read the spot temperature instead of looking at the overall temperature of the environment. Please know, if you're doing overhaul with any TIC whatsoever, it's reading surface temperatures. It's not X-ray vision. It's not reading through a lath and plaster wall or a well-insulated building. You may have a problem behind that wall. You have to use your training and experience first, and the device helps you see things you wouldn't see. So it's very beneficial to help you find things that would have been missed, but if you use it incorrectly, it could be a detriment and cause you to over rely on it and then have a fire later. This is a great example of during overhaul of a drop ceiling in a commercial building, fire mode on the left, survey mode on the right. You don't have to be a level 2 thermographer to get firefighters' attention with all that color on the right to say, that's pretty warm, I need you to cool that down. Then we go back and I taught them what it means. But please don't read the spot temperature. There's two different versions here. One says 243, one says 144. I would want you to encourage to read the entire environment. That's why I'm thankful that the TAC Pro doesn't have the spot temperature on it. You can add it back if you want, but I don't recommend that. This device is specifically beneficial for RIT or SelfRescue. If you get into some really deep reading on Project Mayday, and a lot of my friends who teach some amazing RIT stuff like Rob Ramirez and some other guys and gals out there, you'll learn really quickly that it's important to know how to rescue yourself. And the TIC has the ability to help you find your way out, regain orientation, or if you read that study, you'll realize that the people who rescue the downed firefighters are the ones closest to him or her. So if you're in there and you have a situational awareness TIC and you hear Mayday, 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 Bravo, Charlie, corner, and you're like, that's 10 feet away from me. And then you use that device to locate, assess, and assist with stabilizing and transporting that firefighter and finding your way out. The device paid for itself in one exchange. This is extremely beneficial for redundancy. Fire departments that split crews up and the decision-making TIC goes with a company officer and one firefighter, and then there's two firefighters with no TICs whatsoever, that's a downside. We need to put a situational awareness camera on everybody that's easy to understand. It's great for spot checks. You're alone on the nozzle. Your secondary crew member breaks off to do a search. You look back to make sure they're okay. If you're doing split searches, ladder companies and truck companies like I talked about do that. It's very beneficial for that. It's also extremely beneficial when you got 4 people looking for a small problem in a home, such as an odor of electrical, instead of one firefighter with a TIC and the rest of them walking around going, I don't smell anything. Well, good luck. I need something to help me see. Here's our resources we developed for this particular device. If you go to any of these links on our YouTube channel, I've got a QR code for our YouTube channel at the end where you can go and watch all of our videos, our evaluation of this device. It's already done for you. Training, evaluation, done. Just please use it and share it. That's all we ask. Now, moving on to the TAC Pro. This is the newest camera on the market currently. It was released by Seek Thermal earlier this last year, around April or so. We were blessed to be a part of the design and implementation process. We got to, give our feedback and be a part of that, and it was just an amazing process. And I really enjoyed it because they listened to firefighters, and I hope manufacturers continue to do that. But this camera is exceptional in a couple different ways that I really like. It has a long battery life, 6 hours. It has the widest field of view on the market. It is 320 by 240 resolution. It has something that's a game changer, in my opinion, called mixed gain mode. It has a 25 hertz refresh rate. It's less than 70 millikelvin in its thermal sensitivity. It has a built-in flashlight, so I don't have to hold my flashlight and the TIC. I just point the TIC, so I'm pointing the flashlight. It's not intrinsically safe, so it's not NFPA compliant, but it's IP67 rated. If you click on this link that we have here, you can actually go and watch a 5-minute overview of this device, which I'll provide for you at the end as well if you don't check it now. So we've made it really simple, really easy for everybody to learn this stuff. I don't think firefighters should have to search the world to find these resources. We put it out there. It's on our website. It's on our YouTube channel. It's on our private Facebook group. It's there, but you've got to go watch it, read it, and share it. So let's talk about this camera, decision-making camera, from what we call the first key attribute, which is the field of view. The field of view of a device like a thermal imaging camera is the observable world within its actual horizontal and vertical vision. These cameras don't auto-orient like a cell phone does. If you turn your cell phone sideways versus pointing it straight up, the camera auto-orients from portrait to landscape. A fire service TIC doesn't do that. What you do when you turn the camera sideways in a pistol grip orientation is typically these cameras have a smaller vertical field of view and a wider horizontal field of view. Well, I'm no math magician, but this camera is 42 by 57. So 57 is bigger than 42. So that's 15 more degrees if I turn that camera sideways. That allows me to see the floor and the ceiling in one view. That's called the gangster grip, or flipping it TIC sideways. This was found in a PowerPoint presentation from Carrollton Fire Rescue in Texas in 1999. This is not new. We just kind of put a little fancy phrase on it. But if you think about the two areas you're most concerned with when you're using a decision-making camera and making entry or scanning an environment, In a residential context, it's the floor and the ceiling. Instead of doing a 6-sided scan, I'm doing 3 moves, and I start low, go from my left wall, middle, and right, and I come back across the ceiling watching for convection currents. And that's way faster than your standard 6-sided scan, way more efficient, and allows me to see more with that device. Here's your current models on the market that are similar. Notice the Seek Attack Pro has the widest field of view. Nothing against the other models, but you need to know lenses and field of views are different. You need to know yours and what you will and won't see. When you look at field of view in general, this is our home a few years ago, looking at it 40 feet away with an iPhone. When I put on my fire service SCBA, or my friends overseas, my BA mask, it cuts off my peripheral vision. Think about what peripheral vision happens to peripheral vision when you're under high stress. When your heart rate goes up, you also lose peripheral vision that way. Well, if I have one of those handy dandy Seek Fire Pro X's and I turn it on standing 40 feet away, how much of my house do you think I lose? I go from 210 degrees horizontal field of view in the iPhone down to 32. As my friend Chief Mike Mitchum says, that's like looking through a toilet paper tube. That's very narrow. You could miss something looking through the eyes of a thermal imaging camera and get tunnel vision. You need to know yours and how it affects you. Whereas we look at the Attack Pro, this is an example of how flipping the camera sideways helps you. This firefighter is lost. He's trying to find his fellow firefighters. Watch what happens when we turn this device sideways. What's now visible in the bottom left-hand corner? The hose line. And if you look at this really closely, I can see the floor and the ceiling in this shipping container. I know fire services or fire departments everywhere use shipping containers for training. This particular one's framed out like a house, which is awesome. But if you look at that, when I first started this video, where I was originally, all I saw was about half of it. And if you look really closely, you can see the tip of the nozzle, the smooth bore in the far left-hand corner, and you can see heat coming from the doorway indicating the fire's to the left. Or when I turn it sideways, holding the exact same height, I pick up the floor. And that is powerful. You can do that with any pistol grip style camera pretty easily. Now, in my opinion, next to getting firefighters to carry the camera and get them to quit reading the spot temperature, the most confusing thing about fire service TICs explaining to firefighters is temperature modes. A fire service TIC, when it sees heat, it has to split up that environment into different ranges so that it can focus in on that heat well. The analogy we use, so everybody understands, is like your eye. If you're in the dark, your eye dilates. If you're in the bright light, your eye constricts or your pupil constricts. Why? Because it doesn't want to burn the retina up when we're in bright light, and it doesn't need that much light to see now. So if you look at that from the aspect of how a fire service TIC works, if it's in low heat, it's seeing heat instead of light, those cameras are in what's called high sensitivity or high gain. That means it sees really well in that particular range, whatever it may be, and that's up to the manufacturer on how that's programmed. But if it sees a certain amount of heat within the observable field of view, the camera will freeze for a second, a triangle will show up in the upper left-hand corner, and the majority of fire service cameras on the market, and the entire field of view of pixels will switch to what's known as low gain or low sensitivity. Focuses in on the heat, but you lose discernible details down in that lower, cooler region. There are a few cameras out there that break it into 3 spans, high, medium, low, or high, low, extended low. I'm not a big fan of that because it makes it even more complicated for firefighters who are working in a dynamic, fast-moving, changing environment. I ask firefighters all the time, hey, did you see the triangle in the upper left-hand corner? And they're like, what are you talking about? The triangle in the little green box. Well, let's look at a few examples. Here's one camera in high sensitivity and then low sensitivity. Look at that again. High sensitivity, and then the triangle switches in and the color went away. How many would think that was safe? Watch it. All that color and then boom, triangle engages, color's gone. That could fool a firefighter. Whereas we look at another example of a great camera here, we see the convection currents moving left, the triangle in the upper left-hand corner, it's in low sensitivity. We bring the camera down and then the camera switches to high sensitivity and we're able to see better. That's where most cameras work better. This particular camera works exceptionally well in that lower temperature range. I see the victim, hose line, stairs, the low emissivity metal reflecting the energy back off the stove, the door handles. If you're ever lost in a commercial building, just quick gee whiz point, panic bars. Think about that. They are typically metal. They stand out. Remember that. So when you look here, as we continue to play this video, this other camera, we go from high sensitivity, camera freezes, color shows up after the triangle engages, has a pretty picture in high heat, not so pretty picture in low heat. So every camera has a pro or a con. So you need to know that up front. There is no perfect camera. But what Seek has done with the mixed gain mode, if you look at my friend searching in Germany here, it's smooth. Even with heat behind it, I can still see the firefighters down low. That is phenomenal. You don't see that in most fire service cameras. You either see the fire really well or you see that lower cooler region well. You don't get to see both. Because of mixed gain mode, they're able to do that. Look at this one where we're in Madison Township outside of Notre Dame. I'm scanning up and then I bring it back down and I switch between the hot area and the cooler area, and I don't have a freeze or a lag. Notice there is no triangle with the Seek Attack Pro. It's mixed gain mode. So why does that happen? What's going on here? Here's the beautiful thing about this. Each pixel switches independently on the Attack Pro. So I don't have to worry about the entire field of view doing that. And it helps me see victims and firefighters better. Well, why is that important? Watch this. Standard fire service TIC, my hand goes over the top of a gas burner. My hand doesn't change temperature. The background changed. The camera switched to low sensitivity or low gain. It focused in on the heat. My hand almost disappears. My hand hasn't changed temperature. Now, I don't want to leave it over that burner too long, but I'm trying to show you that every camera has a pro and a con, and you need to know how your camera performs in low heat and high heat and how that affects your ability to see. That is a big deal. Whereas if you look at mixed gain mode in the Seek, each pixel colorizes at 302 and greater, where every other camera, the entire field of view has to switch. So we're looking at the same fire environment with two excellent cameras that are show color at 302 degrees Fahrenheit or 150 degrees Celsius. See, I did throw Celsius in there, my friends. So why is the Seek showing it earlier? Because the pixels are switching independently and the other one has to wait to a certain percentage of the pixels are have that much heat, and then it switches. If you know that, and it makes your decision making simpler and faster and safer, and I'm not worrying about symbols and icons, and the grayscale contrast is pretty jam up, why wouldn't I want to make it simpler and easier for firefighters? And this is the other thing that I hear from a lot of people they don't understand. Fire service TICs have a certain programmed refresh rate. Just like if you buy a TV, you would notice that TVs have anywhere from 60 to 120 hertz, especially your guys who play these first-person shooter games on Xbox. They have computers and video games that are 60, 120 hertz. They're extremely fast. Well, you don't want anything less than 25 hertz. Well, a lot of people say, well, your Attack Pro is 25 hertz and this one's 60 hertz. Well, because of mixed gain mode, I can go from floor to ceiling and with no lag. Cold, hot, cold, back to hot. I want you to look at that. Look at the firefighters right there. I can pick those firefighters out with 1,000-degree temperatures behind them. And then when I scan down onto the floor down here, you can look and see the tiles and the straw clear as day. No lag. That is unheard of because of mixed gain mode. That is something that I've struggled with thermal imaging cameras since the beginning. They all have a lag or delay. This one has very little. And why is that lag or delay important for you to know if your camera has it? Because when it lags or delays information to you as a firefighter, that's a big deal. What could you miss in 1.5 to 3 seconds, depending on the device you're using? We scanned this big room, a friend of mine, Brian Wanstrat here, I can't say his last name correctly, but he's brilliant. We talked about the math behind this. You could lose a massive amount of a room, a big room or even a small room, because firefighters typically don't slow down on their scan. I'm trying to address that, but you need to scan slow and work fast. But if you scan fast and your device is lagging or delaying, you are missing this big orange area here, which could be 80 degrees in this particular example of a 50-foot room. Now, that being said, I want you to understand, every fire service TIC out there has pros and cons. I like cameras. I don't want anybody to think bad about any camera, but you need to understand the disadvantage of a standard gain change is this. There is a delay and the entire field of view has to switch, and the camera will either perform well in cold or hot, not both. This particular programming of this camera allows you to have less delay. It does not delay the thermal threat identification. It basically colorizes each pixel instead of the entire screen having to switch. It's faster, it's safer, it's smarter. I'm not having to worry about whether the triangle shows up. And I'm going to tell you the God's honest truth, that triangle on most cameras in the upper left-hand corner is small. And they are not thinking about the following things about firefighters. A, our eyesight changes as we get older. We're in an environment that stinks as far as visibility. We're wiping the lens and the screen, and I bet you don't wipe that screen in a perfect rectangular pattern and clean the edges. You wipe it like this, a fast circle, like Mr. Miyagi on the Karate Kid. And what you end up missing is the corners, and guess what's hiding in the corner? The triangle. And firefighters don't know what it means. So if I can make it simpler and smarter and faster and safer for firefighters, that's what I want. Here's two examples of this device doing just that. One is in our ARF prop and one is in Carrollton, Texas. Notice how when it has the color engaged, there's very little lag, if any, and how it's smooth, and you see grayscale and color all at once. If you look closely underneath that massive amount of heat, you can see the seats for the ARF prop, clear as day. Where if you look at this one, we're looking down the hallway. They light this gas prop off. I want you to notice what you see underneath it. We see the flames rolling across the ceiling. Look how clear it is down low. Me saying beautiful. I'm weird like that. I like to see fire. And look at that. Right here. You look, when I turn the camera sideways, you can see the floor and the ceiling. That is phenomenal. Where if we were playing with my friends in Germany here at IFRT, this was one of my bucket list items I wanted to do. I loved this particular training. This is my favorite thing. This is their stream placement prop, where they taught me good, bad stream placement. Watch the detail in the Attack Pro when we're in super high heat. This was my best experience with these guys. They're awesome. I really enjoyed going over there with them. So you don't point it down low with the fog stream, they taught me, right? And we're sitting here playing, they're showing me different things they want me to do, but look at that. I can see myself and the instructor who's helping me and the thermal layer clear as day with the Attack Pro, and I'm not losing that detail down low, the cooler region where victims are found, firefighters are found. I'm seeing the threat, I'm seeing the floor, I'm seeing all of that simultaneously without a loss of detail. That is why mixed gain mode is powerful. You look at two cameras side by side, another high resolution camera that's on the left versus the Attack Pro on the right, you see the convection currents, but if you look really closely when we start the video, you don't see color in one. My problem has been when we're teaching thermal imaging is firefighters don't respond if they don't see color. That's dangerous. Grayscale is just as important. That's why NFPA 1801 says no more than 50% of the overall color palette shall be grayscale. Should be a healthy balance between the two for good contrast and threat identification. But when you see fast moving gray stuff, you need to pay attention to it. What the Attack Pro does differently than the other ones is it's also showing color and the grayscale, not a loss. And NFPA 1408 is the only training standard out there that says you as the participant, the end user, you have to know or interpret these colors and their associated temperatures or temperature ranges. Fancy word for Mongo needs to know what yellow, orange, red, and black, gray, white means. NFPA TI Basic is the preferred color palette, which starts off black and goes to red, black, gray, white, yellow, orange, red. It's supposed to be from cold to hot. The problem is each manufacturer gets to choose when those colors show up. They're not standardized. I think that's a mistake. I think it should be standardized across the board, whether I'm in Europe or I'm in the United States. I should see a certain color at a certain point. I should know what grayscale means, and I should have good contrast without making it complicated. Shouldn't have to push a bunch of buttons under stress, because if you study Dr. Grossman's work on combat and get into critical incident stress management and more, you realize that when your heart rate gets above 170, your ability to do a lot of things really diminishes, such as push buttons. You don't do that well. So understand that we should be able to interpret this on the fly quickly and be able to make it easier on our firefighters. Well, how does the Attack Pro show color? Well, we have some different pictures and videos to show you what we call simplifying thermal severity. I just want to know what it means quickly. Now, I can ask any firefighter to go around the fire truck and say, hey, give me a 10-minute class on the Halligan, give me a 10-minute class on the Minuteman load, and they do it quickly. If I pulled the thermal imaging camera out and I said, when does your camera show color? When does it switch? What's the distance to spot ratio on it? What's the resolution? You get this weird, sudden quiet that's kind of uncomfortable. We need to fix that. So what we do is we start with the basics and teach them how their camera responds in heat, and we show them with a small scale prop, small fire, max firebox, dollhouse burn, whatever you want to do. Then we take them into a fire and show them again. So they get it 3 times: classroom, small scale, and big fire. This is the color palette for the Attack Pro. It's the same as the Fire Pro X, so they don't have to learn 2 different color palettes. You see grayscale with the firefighter sitting in the hallway, clear as day, and you see the threat inside the fire room, clear as day. That is a rarity in the thermal imaging world. First rule I was taught in thermography was no thermal imaging camera can see all temperature ranges at once. And technically that's correct. Where Seek Thermal has basically beat the game and been a disruptor, in my opinion, is they figured out a way through programming to make this happen and make it easier for us. That's why I really enjoy using this. And the other thing is, if I'm trying to find the fire, understanding grayscale and convection currents with a camera, it's extremely important to identify, and it's really easy to do so. Check this out. This is in Carrollton Fire and Rescue in Texas, Carrollton, Texas. Look up. Convection currents, left to right. That's hot. Started to see some color. Look at that. Speed, contrast, clarity, no delay, no icons to interpret. I can still see the details down low. Simple. You need to think about your environment as a firefighter. You don't need more complicated things added to the list. And if I gotta find the fire, even though there isn't much color, look at the rivers of convection currents. This is an Ohio Fire Academy, amazing burn building, amazing people there. Really love those guys. Watch what comes across the ceiling. That is phenomenal. If you can't find a fire with that, you're in trouble. The fire's around the corner and moving hot to cold. It's a game of pressures, as Dennis Laguerre says, one of my people I love to death. You're moving from hot to cold, high pressure to low pressure, and the camera's simply seeing the effects of those surfaces as it's moving from one environment to the other and interpreting it and displaying an image the way it's programmed, making it easy for you to say, it's that way. And like Chief Mitchum, another good friend of mine, taught me, hey, a salmon swims upstream. You can follow those convection currents upstream, but salmon swims in water, Andy. You need to flow some water on that and cool that environment down. And if you look here, the video we did from Madison Township, it's really clear how mixed gain mode benefits you as a firefighter. From floor to ceiling, I get that clarity I want without that delay. And if you notice, you can figure out in this picture which one of these guys was the live fire instructor. Because which one of their helmets is hot? Wonder where he's been, right? But notice I can still see the floor and I can still see the threat. Clear, simple, easy. Look at their air pack. See that shiny part right there? That's the metal bracket for their SCBA. That's a low emissivity object. Cameras are programmed at a preset emissivity known as 0.95 to 0.97. You're like, what is that? Basically, the higher the number, closer to 1, the rougher the surface is. The lower the number, closer to 0, it's more like a mirror. And that stands out to a thermal imaging camera because closer to a mirror, it reflects energy. And like I said about a panic bar on a door, metal frame on a window, or a metal bracket on a SCBA or BA cylinder, I can clearly see that and find it really easily. Your cameras out there today in the fire service, whether you're overseas or here, you will find them in varying resolutions. Resolution is the number of pixels in that detector. Unfortunately, there are a lot of them out there that are still low resolution, 160 by 120, which is 19,200 pixels. You do have a few now that are in the middle range, 240 to 180, which is around 43,000 pixels, but NFPA wants you to have at least 320 by 240. Why? That allows you to see a small child's hand Detect, recognize, and identify a victim's hand at 15 feet. I have found as I play with these cameras in fire, we play with them a lot, your ability to see is the most important thing that you can get out of these devices. And you have to know how far away can you see in low heat, medium heat, and high heat. In this particular hallway example, a friend of mine sent me this photo. You can clearly see down the hallway in the Attack Pro, the firefighter halfway down the hallway and the firefighter at the end. And that helps you detect, recognize, and identify those threats. If we were able to get manufacturers to go to a 640 by 480 resolution, which is 307,200 pixels, we could see that same small child's hand at 175 feet. Think of how much better we would be if we had that kind of resolution. And this is why I was passionate at the beginning about what camera you use. If you still have older ones, this is an older camera on the left that claims 110,592 pixels. That's a lot of pixels, but it's made 10 years ago. This is a $800 camera on the right, the Fire Pro X, that has a better picture with less pixels. You're like, well, why is that? Technology's improved, pixel pitch is improved, programming's improved, everything's improved with technology. Make sure you're upgrading your stuff and know the difference that a V6 engine is not just a V6 engine. I can have a Honda V6 from 1990, and my friend can have a V6 Honda in a twin turbo Indy car. Those are greatly different two V6 engines, but they're both V6s. So understand that just because it says this amount of pixels doesn't mean it's going to perform that well. You need to test it in a live fire environment to see that clarity, to see low, medium, and high heat, how your cameras perform and why. This is at Firehouse Expo in the first two pictures in Loudoun County, Virginia on the far right. You can clearly see detail in a low, medium, and high heat environment with the Attack Pro. You can see the thermal layer in the picture on the far right. My favorite that Joey Baxa took, that's a hot seat. You wouldn't want to sit in that metal chair. There's that thermal layer. They said, oh, you shouldn't disturb it. Well, that thermal layer is disturbing because it's moving down, cooking and killing everything in its path, and it ain't staying still. So the last couple of things we're going to talk about with the decision-making cameras are probably the most important is getting firefighters to quit reading the spot temperature. Number one, this is a picture from the Fire Pro X, great picture from West Metro, Colorado. We did some burns with them, phenomenal group, had a great time with them. Notice what the spot temperature says, 144 degrees Fahrenheit. Do you trust that? What's over this firefighter's head? Yellow, which is at least 302 degrees. And the manufacturer's instructions in almost every thermal imaging camera I've read says, do not use the temperature indicator readings as exact measurements. And firefighters are doing that. I had one of the largest fire departments in the country call me in the middle of COVID and asked if they could use their particular cameras to check their firefighters' foreheads for fever. A 13-year-old camera at the time. That's how bad off we are in this particular education and training. We don't know what we don't know. Quoting Dennis Laguerre again, ignorance is okay, arrogance and negligence is not. Let's fix that with education. NFPA 1801 to 2021 standard removed the spot temperature from TI Basic as it was cited as a contributing factor in numerous line of duty deaths. It doesn't need to be used during fire attack. These are apparent temperatures, as I said in the beginning. That's an uncompensated temperature measurement. These measurements can be off by several hundred degrees. Hear me when I say that, several hundred degrees. You're like, how's that possible? Well, straight out of the box, many of these are off by plus or minus 5 to as much as 41 degrees calibration from the factory. They're okay with that. This is a metal trash can where I turn the spot temperature on with the Attack Pro. It has a label on the side that is a rough surface. The metal trash can is a shiny surface. It says the side of this metal trash can is 114 degrees Fahrenheit. Look at the label. It's yellow. Why is that? Because the emissivity of the label is closer to what the camera's calibrated at. Fire service TICs, you can't go in and make adjustments when you're going down a hallway. It's preset. You need to know that this number is greatly off when we talk about the fire. And this danger continues to compound if we don't get the education out there. So what do we do? Here's an actual citation from a line of duty death where the Houston firefighter quoted the temperature measurement because that's what they were told to do in their SOG. It's not their fault. That's what they were told to do. But if you scan that QR code right there, I have a 3-page report on the danger of the spot temperature, the emissivity charts, the reason why you need to understand it. Please share that. I want data, not opinion. I'm not smart enough to risk your life on my opinion. I give you all the data. I'll let you, as my father says, we test, we demonstrate, we share, you decide. That was kill the flashovers model. It's where I started my journey. And I want you to understand that a spot temperature is for industrial cameras, not fire service cameras. Because if you look at the side of the Max Firebox that we use to teach firefighters, it's diamond plated, which is shiny. The spot temperature's turned off here because guess what happens when I turn it on? It says that diamond plating is the same temperature or close to the ambient temperature of the environment because it's reading the reflected apparent temperature. Where if you look at the inside of the box, it's over 1,000 degrees. Do you really want to put your hand on the side of that shiny box? Boil some water in a shiny pot, put a piece of electric tape on it, turn the spot temperature on in your camera, and point the thermal imaging camera at the side of the pot where the shiny part is. While the water is boiling, it will say it's the same temperature or close as the room. Now, you know that's not right. But if you move that reticle, that spot temperature measurement over the electric tape, it will skyrocket. Why? Because the emissivity of the electric tape is closer to what the camera is calibrated at. 0.95 to 0.97 is the same as human skin, carbonaceous objects, rough surfaces. As Chief Kevin Burns taught me, Andy, they're not going to remember the definition of emissivity, but they will remember if it's rough, you can trust it. If it's shiny, it'll burn your hiney. So please make sure you don't use the spot temperature. If you have to engage the spot temperature and you want to use it for whatever reason, all you have to do is hold down the flashlight button on the Attack Pro and it'll come back on. Here's a great chart to stress to you why it's important you understand emissivity and not trusting the camera for a temperature measurement. Let's think about stainless steel fridges in your home. Stainless steel is in everything. Stainless steel is 0.1 emissivity. If your camera says the side of the fridge is 300 degrees Fahrenheit, then the actual measurement is 793 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 493 degrees of variance. That's huge. This is why you have to understand that emissivity is the single most important attribute in temperature measurement. We don't do quantitative measurements in the fire service, okay? To make your life easier, to make everything easier, we've added some resources at the end of this webinar to really hammer this home. Number one, thank you, Seek, for sponsoring it. Number two, they have a burn program. Very few manufacturers are going out of their way to put cameras in your hand and let you go burn with them. You fill out this paperwork, that top QR code allows you to get a camera in the mail. You have so many days to burn with it, you got to send it back. Well, what are you going to do when you burn with it? Well, this is where we come in. I give this away every day. People ask for it. They say, which camera would you buy? And I'm like, none of them. Like, what do you mean? You got to test them and decide for yourself. So we created a guide or a lesson plan. You scan that QR code, it goes straight to my website, gives you the QR, gives you the lesson plan, and tells you how to test it and grade the device. The salesperson is going to tell you what they're going to tell you. No disrespect to them, that they have a job to do, but you need to see it for yourself. Put it in a fire. If you turn a camera on in the day room and buy it based on what it did in the day room, you are setting your fire department up for failure. It is a thermal imaging camera. It's designed to see heat. They don't work well until they start getting above 100 degrees, 200 degrees. Go see the difference. And if you want more, we put all 40-something videos and more on our YouTube channel. You scan this link, everything you saw in this presentation, it's there for you. Check it out. Go share them. We have 800 videos on YouTube. 800, 275 hours a month. People are watching them, building their own programs. They're organized by subject matter, brand, everything. All done for you as the firefighter for free. Why? I grew up in a volunteer fire service. We didn't have a whole lot. And what I've learned in this is this program, this education is not well known. My mission is to get this information out there as much as humanly possible. There's people who can't afford it and their training budgets don't allow for it. This was free thanks to Seek Thermal, but you have to do the work. So make sure you check these videos out, scan this QR code, read them, listen to them, go to our website, our free blog, check all this stuff out. And if you want to reach out to me, my email is at the bottom. There's 2 QR codes here. One is to my website and one is to Seek Thermal, so you can get some of our videos that we have there. All that's done to make life easier for you. We did this for a reason. We care, we're personally invested, and we want firefighters to fulfill the mission, which is to save lives and property. And if you want to do that with just your eyes closed and feeling around in the darkness, you're putting the citizen at a greater risk than if you simply look and give the firefighters that information and move with purpose because now you have it. I'm not asking you to stare at that camera when you go in the fire. I'm asking you to simply look, assess, communicate, and know what you're doing. Thank you for your time today. We went over by about 5 minutes. I appreciate Seek Thermal's opportunity by providing this for you. Brent will give you more details as it's over. Thank you, Brent.
All right, thanks, Andy. I think you wrapped it up great. There's a lot of great resources on Andy's website, insighttrainingllc.com, as well as his YouTube channel. If you're interested in learning more about the Seek thermal cameras, visit thermal.com. So again, thank you, Andy, and appreciate everyone who attended today.